The sound of Amber's laugh at the BBQ didn't come with warning. It was one of those sharp, performative things, a noise made for attention, not amusement. I was standing near the grill, flipping the corn, when I heard her say it. The table erupted with Kevin's chuckle, the kind of half-hearted laugh you give when you're too spineless to say it's not funny. A few others let out small sounds of discomfort. Charlotte, bless her, reached for her drink like she wished she could disappear into it. "You'll be in a nursing home soon, right?" And me? I didn't say a damn thing. I just stood there, with the heat of the coals rising into my face and my hands steady on the tongs. I looked across the yard, my yard, and wondered how I had gotten here. Not to this day, not to this moment, but to this life, where the child I raised laughed at the thought of shipping me off. She said it like a joke, but I've lived long enough to know that some jokes are just cruelty wrapped in sugar. They always arrive late. That day was no different. 40 minutes after the food should have started, they came strolling in like they were celebrities at a backyard premiere. Kevin gave me that distracted side hug that says, "I see you, but barely," and Amber walked in like she owned the damn deed. She tossed her purse on my dining chair, wrinkled her nose at the potato salad, my late husband's favorite recipe, and muttered something about the wallpaper looking like a hospice. The kids didn't say hello. They each disappeared into screens like I'd set out pixelated place cards. Harper spread herself out across the carpet, shoes still on. Wyatt started unstacking the napkins I had folded into fans. Maddie, 12 going on 30, gave me that look, the one that said, "Why are you still trying?" And I smiled. Because I'd learned that smiling kept me safe. When we moved outside for dinner, like we always do, under the old oak tree, Tom planted the year Kevin was born. It should have felt sacred. But there she was again, raising her wine glass, locking eyes with me, like she was delivering a toast to humiliation. "We'll have to start touring nursing homes soon, right?" she said loudly, too loudly. "Or are you planning to haunt this place forever?" The silence was so thick it could have drowned a heartbeat. Then Kevin snorted. A real, childish snort. I looked at him then, not as my son, but as a stranger who had learned to smile through someone else's disdain. I didn't flinch. I didn't correct them. I chewed my chicken and swallowed it like gravel, looked out over the yard, and thought, this is the last time I play host to my own erasure. Nobody helped clean up. Nobody said thank you. And when the sun dipped behind the tree line and they all filed out again, I stood at the sink with barbecue sauce under my nails and silence ringing in my ears. The oak tree cast a long shadow across the lawn, and for a second I saw Tom's hands, big, calloused, steady, planting it like he knew someday it would need to shelter something more than just birthdays and lemonade. I went inside and locked the door. No tears, no anger. I walked down the hallway, past family portraits that hadn't been updated since Kevin's wedding, mostly because there hadn't been a single moment worth preserving. I opened the hall closet and reached for the fireproof box on the top shelf. It took both hands to pull it down. I laid it on the dining table Amber had criticized earlier, the one she said felt cramped, like a starter home someone forgot to upgrade. Just a key turning in a lock that had been metaphorically rusted shut for years. Inside the box was a folder labeled Plan B. The thing they never understood was that I didn't break last night. I had been breaking quietly, slowly, for years. This wasn't the crack. It was the click. Click on my phone, as I typed the message to Dean. I'm ready. It contained exactly what the name promised. My escape plan, a deed, a transfer of title, a trust document signed 2 years ago and kept hidden until I had a reason to use it. At the top, clipped neatly to the papers, was the business card of Dean Lerner, my lawyer and these days my lifeline. And once it was sent, I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Kevin once practiced spelling words with jelly beans, and stared at the outline of my life. The papers, the property taxes I paid from a separate account, the receipts, the updated passwords, the instructions for utilities. Not out of spite, but survival. Amber's voice still echoed in my head. Haunt this place forever, as if my existence was a burden, a ghost story she couldn't wait to rewrite in her own minimalist, Pottery Barn aesthetic. But I wasn't going to be the ghost. I was going to be the storm. The morning after the BBQ, I didn't sleep in. I was up before the sun, the way I used to be when Kevin was little and needed his lunches packed. My body still ran on the rhythm of obligation, but this time, I wasn't moving for anyone else. I boiled water for tea, not coffee. My stomach couldn't handle coffee anymore, especially not after nights like that. I stood by the sink, watching steam rise from the kettle like smoke from a battle I'd just survived. I didn't need to convince myself. The decision had already settled in my bones. I sipped my tea in silence, then pulled out a pen and a fresh yellow notepad. Not the planner I kept in the kitchen drawer. This list didn't belong in a place where people had once scribbled grocery items and bake sale reminders. This was a different kind of preparation. Surgical. Fine. I wrote the date at the top of the page, July. Then, call Dean. Update escrow contact. Call Camille. Transfer gas, electric, water. Cancel alarm system. Pack important documents. Pull sentimental items only. I stopped there for a second and circled only. It was a warning to myself. No detours, no second guessing, just what mattered. After I finished the list, I walked down the hallway again. Not like the night before, no longer heavy with disbelief. This time, I walked with purpose. I opened closets, pulled open drawers, opened every cabinet as if I were conducting a final inventory of a museum about to close. The house wasn't full of junk, but it was full of echoes, things that used to mean something before Amber started calling them clutter. In the living room, I stood in front of the old oak bookshelf. It still smelled like lemon oil and pencil shavings. I ran my hand across the shelf until I found the tiny ceramic cat Kevin made in first grade. Lopsided and half-painted, it had sat there for over 20 years. Amber once joked it looked like a roadkill souvenir, and Kevin had laughed, but I hadn't laughed. I'd quietly moved it behind a picture frame for safekeeping. I held it now, curled into my palm like something that still had a heartbeat. I took it. From there, I moved to the box under my bed, the one with my mother's quilt and Tom's letters from his first job site in 1979. Things that weren't valuable to anyone else, but to me, they were anchors, proof that I had existed before they decided I was just furniture, with a pulse. Camille called around 10 a.m. She always did the day after family events. Not to gossip, just to check that I was still standing. "Hey B," she said, her voice low and warm like a song I used to know. "Can you come over?" I asked. "Bring coffee and maybe boxes." There was a pause. Then, simply, "How many?" She didn't ask why. "Enough," I said. "We've been friends long enough that she didn't need to." By noon, she pulled into the driveway with her old van, the one her son used to take to college. The side door stuck, and the paint was chipped, but it still worked. Just like us, worn down in spots, but not broken, never broken. I met her at the front door, and let her in without ceremony. "I brought tape," she said, holding it up like a peace offering. I nodded, and pointed toward the hallway. "Start with the coat closet." We didn't talk much. Camille knew how to keep silence sacred. She just handed me boxes and made space on the floor. At one point, she opened a drawer full of holiday linens and paused. "Any of this matter to you?" I shook my head. Let them have it. She didn't ask who them was. She already knew. By 3 o'clock we'd packed 6 boxes, photos, documents, the quilt, the cat, and 2 bins of labeled keepsakes. Everything else could be forgotten. I didn't cry, didn't shake. But when I reached for the baking dish Tom gave me for our 10th anniversary, my hand trembled. Camille placed a hand on my shoulder. "You sure about this?" I've never been surer of anything. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the dogwood tree by the kitchen window. The same tree Kevin used to sit under with his books. The same tree I planted after Tom died. I remember the roots were so stubborn, we had to break up the clay soil with a pickaxe. Camille and I did it ourselves, sweating in July heat, cursing at rocks like they were enemies of progress. It bloomed the next spring, and every spring after, even when everything else stopped blooming. I pulled out the folder, the one stamped with a gold notary seal, and placed it beside my packing list. Dean would file everything once I gave the green light. By late afternoon, I opened the old safe in the back of my bedroom closet. Inside were the trust documents Dean had drawn up. All signed, all sealed, all ready. The title of the house had been transferred months ago. Quietly, legally, fully. They didn't know, because I didn't owe them that knowledge. The LLC bore my maiden name, hidden under a Nevada registration with no public links to Kevin or Amber. I was a ghost in my own paperwork, exactly how I wanted it. And I had. He texted back within 10 minutes. Acknowledged. Buyer agent will proceed. Let me know if you want to be present at close. I didn't reply. I didn't need to be present. I just needed to be gone. That night, Camille stayed for dinner. We ate leftovers, ribs and roasted corn in silence. At the kitchen table, Amber said, felt like a staff lounge at a nursing facility. The nerve. I had cooked for that family since before Amber knew Kevin existed. Every 4th of July, every Christmas Eve, every single damn Sunday, when he was little and used to beg me for pancakes shaped like Mickey Mouse. But last night, I was just a cook who overstayed her welcome. After Camille left, I walked through the house one more time, not to mourn it, to make peace with it. I stood in front of the hallway mirror, the one Amber always called dated. I looked at my reflection, gray hair pulled back, cardigan sleeves rolled up, lines carved into my olive skin like chapters of a novel I'd written alone. Not anymore. I looked tired, but not weak. The sun hadn't fully risen when I woke the next morning. Not that I'd really slept. My body rested, yes, but my mind had been drafting blueprints all night. Contingencies. Lists inside of lists. I made coffee this time, stronger than usual, and drank it black. I wanted the bitterness. I wanted to feel it burn, to remind myself I was still in charge of my own mouth, my own time, my own ending. And that was enough. Camille showed up around 8:30 with a box of donuts and a pair of gardening gloves. She knew I wouldn't eat the donuts. That wasn't the point. She set them down and went straight for the boxes without a word. We packed with the quiet rhythm of women who had done too much for too long. We didn't talk about the house or the people who used to live in it with me. We talked about duct tape and which drawer the scissors were in. Every so often, Camille would hold something up and ask, keep or toss, and I'd say toss, even if it broke my heart. It was nearing 10 when I heard Amber's voice. Not in person, on speakerphone. It came from the open window in the den. Camille had stepped out to toss something in the bin and left her phone sitting on the windowsill. Amber's voice carried through like smoke. I swear, if she caught the flu and dropped, we could finally put in those skylights. She laughed, loud, real, ugly. Then Kevin mumbled something too quiet to catch. But what mattered wasn't what he said, it was what he didn't. He didn't correct her, he didn't sound shocked, he didn't even shift the subject. And in that moment, something in me calcified. Not from pain. No, that was too soft a word. It was clarity, chemical and sharp. This wasn't the first cruel thing Amber had said, and it wouldn't be the last. But this one was different. This one was said when she thought I wasn't listening. This one was honest. I stood there, holding a stack of bath towels, and realized I wasn't mad that she joked about my death. I was relieved. Because now I had a line I couldn't ignore, something I couldn't forgive, not even for the grandkids. They'd stopped pretending to care. So I stopped pretending to wait for them to change. I walked back into the kitchen, pulled out the envelope marked final transfer, and slipped the escrow documents inside. I placed it in my purse, the way you'd pack for a flight, not dramatic, just necessary. Like I was heading to the post office instead of ending a legacy. The irony didn't escape me. The house I scrubbed, painted, and paid off was now my cage, and I was the one holding the key. That night, Kevin texted me a photo of Harper. She was asleep on the couch, a stuffed animal half tucked under her chin. I stared at that message for a full minute. 1 minute, 60 seconds of calculated breathing, because I knew the temptation that came next. The tiny, destructive voice that said, "It's not their fault, they're just kids. Don't punish the children for the sins of their parents. She missed you today," he wrote. But then I thought back to last Easter, Maddie rolling her eyes when I asked her to put her plate in the sink. "Mom says, you like doing that stuff anyway," she'd said, with a smirk that wasn't hers, it was Amber's, a perfect copy. And Amber, standing behind her, didn't correct it. She just poured herself another glass of wine and winked at Kevin. The mimicry stung more than the insult. It was proof that Amber's influence had rooted itself in the children, like ivy. Quiet. Choking. I didn't reply to the message. I didn't even type a draft. I just locked my phone and went out to the backyard. The oak tree stood tall and silent, just like it always had. I ran my hand across its bark, the ridges cool under my fingertips. I remembered Tom's hands, the way he knelt in the dirt, soaked in sweat, planting this tree like it was a monument to something permanent. If only he could see this now. If only I could ask him, is this the right time? Is this the right way? But grief doesn't work like that. I went back inside, packed my baking dishes and my mother's teacups. Every item I boxed was another stitch in the seam I was tearing away from my old life. It doesn't offer advice, it just sits inside you and grows roots of its own. Camille stayed until midnight. Before she left, she kissed my cheek and whispered, "They'll never see it coming." I nodded, but I didn't feel triumph. I felt something colder, a kind of surgical precision. That night, before bed, I folded a letter and taped it to the fridge. No flourish, no last words of sentimentality, just fact. Inside, I had already watched the entire scene play out. Kevin fumbling with the key, Amber screaming into her phone, Maddie asking where I went and not getting an answer that made sense. And the realization that no one had the power to call me back once I chose to go silent. Amber, this home has been sold. I no longer reside here. You have 48 hours to vacate. Legal documents enclosed. Contact Dean Lerner for inquiries. Do not contact me. I wrote it in black ink. On cream stationery, placed a notarized copy of the deed transfer underneath, with the trust's logo and the buyer's attorney's signature front and center. I left the envelope unsealed so she could see, instantly, how official it was. I wanted her to feel the weight of it in her hands, not to punish, but to reveal the truth she never wanted to face. She never had power here. I nodded. Let's not linger. You ready? She asked, the engine still running. The morning I left, the house was still, not the kind of stillness that means peace, but the kind that follows a decision so complete, so deliberate, there's nothing left to say. Camille arrived at dawn, with her van already half filled with folded blankets, bubble wrap and plastic bins. She wore the same denim jacket she used to throw over her scrubs when we were younger, back when we'd meet at the diner after shifts and swap stories like war veterans. I didn't cry. Not then. Not even when I walked through the front door for the last time and looked at the oak floor. Tom and I installed ourselves. Every corner of that house held a version of me. But none of those versions were welcome anymore. Not the young wife sanding baseboards, not the teacher grading spelling tests at the kitchen table, not the mother holding her son's sweaty hand after he fell from his bike. They were ghosts, and I wasn't dying with them. We moved with speed, but no panic. Camille took the heavier bins. I made sure each item in the final load was accounted for. My documents, photo albums, a shoebox labeled Kevin K6, the flash drive, and a Tupperware of Camille's lemon bars. I don't know why, but I needed those bars. Maybe to taste something sweet while everything else around me dissolved. Before I shut the front door for the last time, I walked through each room. I unplugged the router, turned off the pilot light, shut off every breaker, took one last look at the ceramic tile I had once chosen with such care, then taped the letter to the fridge, right above the grocery list. Amber started last week. That made me smile. We drove in silence, windows cracked just enough to let the air carry the scent of grass and pavement and freedom. Camille turned on the radio, but kept the volume low, an unspoken understanding that today wasn't for words. She wouldn't miss the eggs, but she'd notice the letter. We reached my new place before 9 a.m., a downtown condo I found months ago, tucked between a quiet cafe and a florist that smelled like eucalyptus and sunflowers. There was no yard, no porch swing, no dogwood tree, but there was security, working plumbing, and most importantly, a lock that no one else had a key to. As we unloaded the last box, Camille paused and looked at me. You want to go back for anything else? No, I said, not even a second glance. She smiled softly. Then let's seal the chapter. While Camille drove back to her house, I sat cross-legged on the floor, a blanket wrapped around my shoulders. I ate a lemon bar with my hands, sticky and slow, and listened to the quiet. No TV, no fridge humming, no footsteps upstairs or someone asking where the mustard was, just the echo of my own breath. We did. That afternoon, Sandra Chu, the buyer's agent, arrived with her clipboard, and navy blue heels that didn't suit the summer heat. She shook my hand and said, "All clean on title. We're closing Tuesday." She didn't ask why I sold, didn't ask if I was okay, just handed me paperwork, and we reviewed the signatures like we were talking about insurance premiums. I appreciated that. I didn't want sympathy. I wanted closure. Sandra left, and I sat with that paperwork on my lap, marveling at how quickly it could be over once you stopped explaining yourself to people who never listened. They were out of town for the weekend, some cousin's birthday in Marin. Amber insisted they attend, even though Maddie had the flu. I know this because she posted a boomerang of Harper licking frosting off her fingers with the caption, "Nothing stops a party queen." They didn't know yet. No one said anything about me. No text, no check-in, not even a question about the house. Perfect. They had no clue what was waiting for them. At 2:47 p.m., according to Alan, the neighbor who could moonlight as a surveillance drone, they pulled into the driveway. Amber was first. She had a giant iced coffee in one hand and 3 shopping bags in the other. She was barking into her phone about vendor deposits. Kevin followed with Harper half asleep on his shoulder, trying to elbow the trunk closed. Amber stuck her key in the lock. It didn't turn. She tried again. Didn't budge. Kevin tried it. Same result. Meanwhile, Maddie wandered up behind them, nose deep in her phone, and noticed the envelope taped to the glass. "Kevin," she shouted. "Did you change the latch again? This thing's jammed." She reread the line. "Do not contact me." He read it out loud. Amber paced, then shouted, "Is this a joke?" She handed it to Kevin. And something inside her broke. Alan said she stomped her foot, called me a smug old bat, and grabbed her phone to dial 9. Kevin turned pale and sat down on the steps like someone had unplugged him. The police came. 2 officers, calm and unimpressed. Sandra was already there, clipboard in hand. She showed them everything, the trust, the deed, her ID. Officer Moreno told Kevin plainly, "Unless you can prove tenancy or ownership, you'll need to vacate." Moreno shrugged. "Doesn't change the deed, sir." Kevin argued, said he lived there, paid for bunk beds, mowed the lawn. Amber filmed it all, claiming elder abuse, fraud, family betrayal. Sandra asked them to leave the porch. They were given 10 minutes to grab what was theirs off the lawn. Then they drove off. To a motel. Room 208, next to a gas station and a closed-down Denny's. And I didn't feel proud. Not really, but I felt something close to peace. That night, Camille came by. She brought a bottle of red and a smirk she didn't try to hide. "They're at the Red Maple," she said, plopping onto the couch. Amber just posted a filtered selfie. Caption said, "Chaos, but cute." I didn't laugh, but I did pour 2 glasses of wine and toast her. "To locks," I said. Camille raised her glass. "To not needing a key." The motel didn't humble them, at least not immediately. I watched from the shadows, not literally, but through Camille's burner account, the one we set up just to track their digital tantrums. Amber wasted no time turning her humiliation into content. The filtered selfies, the cryptic, a grainy video of Harper playing with a sock in the motel room, captioned, "When family forgets blood." Kevin sat in the background of one clip, hunched over and clearly uncomfortable. Maddie didn't even look up from her phone. Wyatt wasn't visible at all. I imagined he was off in a corner somewhere, using the motel Wi-Fi to download whatever game I had unknowingly funded for the last 3 years. They didn't say my name, not directly, but their faces screamed it. Amber's first caption was, "We were blindsided by betrayal." Then she tagged influencers I'd never heard of and added 3 crying emojis and the word healing. Camille and I watched the whole thing from my condo balcony while eating takeout dumplings and sipping ginger tea. "She really thinks people will feel sorry for her," Camille said, scrolling. "She's not wrong," I replied. And she wasn't. The comment section was filled with sympathy. "You're so strong, Mama. Some people don't deserve grandkids." Sending light and strength. I laughed so hard I nearly choked on a wonton. The woman who called me extra behind my back and mocked my teacups now wanted to be seen as a victim of cruelty and classism. She had turned my silence into her soapbox. But silence, as I knew well, is never empty. It holds weight. And I wasn't done speaking, even if I wouldn't use words. So I mailed her a package. No return address. No note, just a certified envelope with one printed page. A single quote in bold black font. "You'll be in a nursing home soon, right? Amber." Her own words, delivered like a mirror. She received it 2 days after they checked into room 208. I only know that because Kevin still hadn't updated his LinkedIn location settings, and Camille's friend Alan, the neighborhood hawk, texted her when they came back to the house for a second attempt. "They're back," Alan wrote. "Same key, same result." They didn't knock this time, just rattled the door and walked around the perimeter like raccoons circling a locked trash bin. Kevin called a locksmith. But Sandra was already 2 steps ahead. She gave the man the trust paperwork, showed him the deed, and the locksmith didn't even attempt the latch. "If your name's not on it," he said, "your key doesn't matter." Amber apparently screamed something about lawsuits and civil rights violations, but the officer on site, yes, another one, reminded her that property laws don't bend for Instagram stories. That night, I got an email. Not from Kevin, not from Amber, but from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "Do you really not want us anymore?" The body of the email was one sentence. "Why doesn't Grandma want us anymore?" It hit me like a punch in the sternum. I knew it was Maddie. I recognized the phrasing, the way she ran "anymore" together, anymore, just like on her old spelling tests, when she used to sit beside me at the kitchen counter, her sneakers swinging back and forth under the chair. I stared at the email for several minutes, then longer. My hands hovered over the keyboard, and for the first time since I'd locked the door, I felt something break, not a regret, but a fracture. A small, jagged one, like the kind in a windshield that grows when you ignore it. She was a child. They all were. But they weren't clean slates anymore. They were impressionable surfaces, and Amber had carved her signature into every inch. I could feel it in the way Maddie rolled her eyes when I asked her to set the table, in Wyatt's smirk when he said, "You're being extra," a phrase he couldn't have invented, in Harper's quiet disinterest in anything that wasn't lit up, noisy, or fed through a screen. If I opened the door for them, Amber would walk through it too. She always had. So I didn't reply. Instead, I opened the voice recorder app I'd used to log Amber's comments over the years, remarks she made on speakerphone, in group texts, in rooms where she thought I didn't matter. I recorded a single line, "You'll understand when you're older. And I still love you." Then I transferred the file to a flash drive, labeled it for later, and locked it in the drawer next to my will. That night, I didn't sleep well. Not because I doubted myself, but because grief isn't linear. You don't miss people. You miss the people you imagined they could become. In the morning, I emailed Dean, asked him to update the will again. "Can we add a clause?" I wrote. "Conditional inheritance, minimum 1,000 hours of community service, verified by a third-party case manager, no workarounds, no family connections." He responded in 10 minutes. Already anticipated. Drafting now. The next day, I bought a plant. A rosemary bush. Small, fragile. I named her May. I watered her while listening to a podcast about boundaries and trauma recovery. And I didn't feel like a woman abandoned. I felt like a woman beginning. People think closure is a moment, something clean and cinematic, a dramatic speech, a slam of a door, a letter slid under the threshold with trembling hands. But that's not how it was for me. For me, closure came quietly. It came with a clean countertop, an unread email in a spam folder, and a tiny rosemary bush named May, reaching toward the sun through my balcony window. It had been a few days since the motel incident. Amber's social media barrage hadn't slowed. Now she was filming TikToks, sitting on the scratchy motel bed, speaking in a whispery voice like she was narrating a trauma documentary. Sometimes the people who raise you are the ones who hurt you the most. In the background, Kevin sat stiffly, staring at a hotel pamphlet. Harper played with a Ziploc bag. Maddie scrolled without blinking. Wyatt wasn't even visible. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt distance, like I was watching a show I used to care about, but now couldn't even remember the characters' names. Then came the message to Camille. Someone had found her comment, under one of Amber's vague posts, "Some people need to learn gratitude," and traced her account. Suddenly, her inbox filled with strangers calling her bitter, jealous, toxic. One even called her a snake enabler. Camille, being Camille, didn't flinch. She responded to the most aggressive message with a 3-word reply and a PDF attachment. She tried stealing a house from a widow. Attached was the trust deed. The messages stopped. I didn't post, didn't respond. I just watered May, folded laundry, and listened to the city move outside my window like background music to a life I finally recognized as mine. And then, one afternoon, came the knock. 3 of them. Sharp. Measured. Not angry but precise, like someone trying to control the room before they even entered it. I didn't answer right away. I looked through the peephole first, and there she was. Amber, hair pulled back. Oversized sunglasses. Harper on her hip like a well-chosen accessory. Behind her 2 steps back was Kevin. He had that blank expression he wore when he didn't want to deal with anything. Shoulders slightly hunched, one hand in his pocket, the other gripping a folded letter. Amber spoke first. "Barbara, we need to talk." Her voice was soft. Too soft. Rehearsed. "This has gone too far. The kids are suffering." I didn't open the door. I didn't speak. I let her sweat in the hallway with her curated grief and hotel perfume. Amber tried again. "We're willing to work something out, okay? We can all sit down, fix this for the kids." And that's when Harper looked up from her shoulder and asked, in the clearest little voice, "Are we going back to Grammy's house now?" It should have cracked me. It didn't. I felt it, yes, a pressure in my chest, the ache of memory and loss and the fragile hope in a child's voice. But it didn't change my position, because I knew what she meant by Grammy's house. She meant the house Amber walked through, like it was already hers. The one Kevin let her redesign piece by piece until my memories were boxed up and labeled clutter. They weren't asking to come back to me. They were asking to return to comfort. Kevin finally stepped forward. He reached into his back pocket and unfolded the paper. A letter from a lawyer, maybe, some kind of plea, some thin attempt at leverage. I didn't take it. Instead, I reached into the drawer of the entry table and pulled out the small black flash drive labeled, "Just in case." I held it out through the barely cracked door. Amber hesitated, took it like it was radioactive. "What is this?" she asked. My voice didn't waver. "It's every voicemail, every group text, every message where you mocked me, excluded me, talked about me like I was dead already. It's all there." Her face stiffened. Kevin looked away. I kept going. "You didn't just forget I was a person. You taught my grandchildren to forget too." Amber opened her mouth to interrupt, but I held up my hand. "No, jokes don't cost people their homes. You did that, all on your own." Harper whimpered. Kevin adjusted her in his arms and said, "Please, Mom, don't shut the door like this. We're family." And I looked him straight in the eye, for the first time in what felt like years, and said, "You stopped being my family the day you laughed when she said I should be in a nursing home. That did it." He flinched. Amber turned, muttering something I didn't catch. Something angry and bitter and irrelevant. Kevin lingered. Then followed. I closed the door slowly. Not with drama. Not with fury. With finality. And I didn't lean against it. Didn't cry. Didn't I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and sat down at the small table near the window. The air was still. The city buzzed far below. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. A text from Kevin. "I hope you can live with what you've done." I stared at it. Then deleted it without replying, because I could live with what I'd done. In fact, it was the first thing in years I felt I could live with it all. The day after they came to my door, I called Dean. There was no rage in my voice, no urgency, just precision. "I want to finalize the will," I said. "No more drafts, no more options. Just make it legal. Make it airtight." Dean, bless him, didn't ask questions. He never had. From the start, he treated me not like a sad old woman with a vendetta, but like a client with a plan, a woman with agency. That was the gift he gave me. Respect, without the pity. "I understand," he said. "What do you want it to say?" I told him exactly. Kevin and Amber were to receive nothing. Not a cent, not a sentence, not a spoon, or photo, or polite explanation, no envelopes of forgiveness, no poetic nods to reconciliation, just a legal absence, sharp and undeniable. And the grandchildren? They would only inherit under strict conditions. Each child must complete a minimum of 1,000 verified hours of community service before their 21st birthday. Hours to be tracked and approved by a third-party case manager unaffiliated with me or anyone in the family. No shortcuts. No forged papers. No influencer charity campaigns disguised as effort. If they earned it, they could have something. If they didn't, they wouldn't. It wasn't revenge. It was proof that they had tried to become better than how they were being raised. Dean listened silently, then said, "Understood. I'll send the final version for signature." And he did. 28 pages. Clean, legal, secure, structured like the boundaries I had never learned to set in real life, but now built into paper with the weight of law. As I scrolled through the document, page by page, I felt the pressure in my chest loosen. Not like joy, not like triumph, just release. Like bricks sliding off a rooftop, one by one. At the end, I added something myself. A handwritten note, attached to the executor's letter. Under no circumstances are Kevin or Amber to be notified upon my death. Let them find out with the rest of the world. That was my last word on the matter. I assigned Natalie, my goddaughter, my Sunday soup dropper, my occasional movie date, as the sole executor. She'd asked nothing of me in years, never once hinted at inheritance. She simply showed up. And that, I realized, was enough to be trusted with everything. I called her that night. "It's official," I said. "You okay?" she asked gently. "Yeah, I think I finally am." She came over the next day with Thai food and a 6-pack of sparkling water. We ate on the balcony, in the late afternoon sun, like it was any other Tuesday, because it was, and yet, it wasn't. Something had shifted. I could breathe in ways I hadn't in years. My life was mine again, not a borrowed shell, not a battleground, not a holding pattern while I waited to be loved correctly. Later that evening, I got another message from Kevin. This one was short. "So that's it." I didn't reply, didn't open it. Instead, I blocked his number, then deleted the entire thread. And I felt nothing, just space. Camille dropped by a few hours later with a lemon tart and a bottle of cheap champagne. "This calls for something bubbly," she said, grinning. I laughed harder than I had in months. Not because of the champagne, not even because of the occasion, but because she said it like it was a victory, and somehow it felt like one. We sat on my small couch until the sun went down, talked about nothing, just little things. Favorite movie lines, the worst casseroles we'd ever made, old coworkers we were glad to never see again. At one point, she raised her glass and said, "To boundaries." And I clinked mine and answered, "To finally not giving a damn." That night, after she left, I gathered a few things into a small memory box. The flash drive, a copy of the final will, a photo of me and Kevin when he was 10, laughing, pre-Amber, a photo of Tom holding Kevin on his shoulders in the yard. I placed them all inside with a note on top, for history, not for forgiveness. Then I slid the box under my bed next to the cedar chest I hadn't opened since Tom died. I didn't light a candle, didn't pray, but I did stand at the window for a long moment, looking out at the city, the lights blinking in office buildings and apartments, each window its own tiny world. A reminder that life keeps moving, with or without permission. Not the real them, and whatever grief was left, it was for the versions of them I once believed could exist. The kinder version of Kevin, the teachable version of Maddie, the daughter-in-law I once hoped Amber might become. But I wasn't mourning their absence anymore. I was honoring mine. 8 months have passed. Not a text, not a voicemail, not a single knock on my door. No surprise visits with guilt-laced casseroles or handwritten cards pretending to remember my birthday. No tearful messages on holidays. No last-ditch efforts with half-hearted apologies. Just silence. And for the first time in years, I don't flinch at the quiet, I welcome it. Christmas came and went. I spent it at Camille's house, brought my lemon bars, just like always. We sat by her fireplace, with her 2 grown kids, now married and kind, and a grandchild who called me Aunt B, even though we share no blood. He hugged my leg when I walked in and asked if I brought cookies. I gave him 2. At one point, someone asked if I had any children. I smiled and said, "Not anymore." Nobody pressed. Camille squeezed my hand under the table. That was the only acknowledgement needed. Natalie checks on me every Sunday. Sometimes she brings takeout, sometimes she just shows up with a cheap bottle of wine and some trashy reality show queued up on her laptop. We laugh over scenes of absurd drama, and I marvel at how ridiculous other people's problems can be when you finally lay your own down. On Thursdays, I take a pottery class with a group of women over 65 who refuse to slow down for anything. One of them asked if I was dating. I nearly dropped my clay slab laughing. "No," I said, "I don't want a man, I want peace." They laughed too, nodded in agreement. May, my rosemary plant, is thriving. She's grown 3 inches since I brought her home, and I talk to her every morning. I don't even realize I'm doing it sometimes. Just casual comments about the weather or how the coffee turned out. She never interrupts. I started sleeping through the night again. At first I didn't understand why. The bed was the same firmness as my old one. The temperature was just as finicky, but then I realized I was finally somewhere I wasn't required to carry other people's chaos. No thermostat arguments, no dishes left for me like a maid, no backhanded compliments I had to translate into silence. Freedom didn't arrive with fanfare. It came in the form of unremarkable mornings. I still think about the kids sometimes. That part hasn't left. I wonder if Maddie remembers our baking nights, if Wyatt remembers how we used to build cereal box castles on the floor. I wonder if Harper ever asks where Grammy went when no one's filming her. But then I remember the Easter when Maddie rolled her eyes at me, called me tryhard, and Amber laughed behind her, or the time Wyatt parroted Amber's favorite word, extra, as if caring too much was something to be mocked. They were becoming versions of her. Echoes. And every echo carried less of me. Even if I left the door open, they wouldn't walk through it without her. And I'd already burned that bridge, salted the earth, walked away barefoot. They haven't tried to sue me. Dean says it's probably because they know they'd lose. The documents are airtight, and I have receipts for everything. I imagine Amber hissing into her phone, trying to Google loopholes while Kevin stands in the background muttering, "Let's just leave it." He always did want everything handled without confrontation, without cost, without change. I haven't explained myself to anyone because no one who matters asked me to. The people who truly love you don't demand reasons for your boundaries. They hold space for them. Last week, Natalie dropped off a printed copy of the final, executed will. I placed it in my safe. No ceremony. Just one more document in a life finally filed under peace. Then came the email. Anonymous address. No subject line, just one sentence. "Are you really never coming back?" At first, I didn't open it. I stared at it in my inbox, thinking about how many times I'd walked away only to be pulled back by questions like that. How many boundaries I'd redrawn because someone knew how to tap into the ache I never spoke out loud. But when I finally did click it open, I realized it didn't matter who sent it. Kevin, Amber, Maddie. The answer was the same. No, I wasn't coming back. Because I'd already written that answer in every single decision I'd made since the night of the barbecue. In the trust, in the safe, in the letter on the fridge, in the silence that followed. I hit reply, typed a single line. "We haven't spoken since the eviction, and I have no plans to change that. Please do not contact me again unless it's through legal counsel." Then I blocked the address, closed the laptop, went out onto the balcony, sat next to May in the morning light, and whispered something only she could hear. "You're safe," I told her. And maybe I was talking to myself, too. I don't keep a calendar on the wall anymore. No circled dates. No red ink reminders of birthdays, anniversaries, or school plays I was never really invited to but always showed up for anyway. Instead, I mark time in softer ways now. The rosemary plant, May, bloomed tiny purple flowers this week. That was something. A reminder that life unfolds on its own schedule, without needing to be announced. I went for a walk yesterday. It was nothing special. A loop through the park down the block, a stop at the corner thrift store. But as I walked past the bookshelves, something caught my eye. A lamp shaped like a lighthouse. It was a little battered, slightly chipped at the base. But there was something about it. A beacon. The cashier was an older man, with kind eyes who didn't ask a single question as he wrapped it in newspaper. "Looks like you're building a new life," he said. I nodded. "I am. And I meant it." Back at home, I placed the lamp on the end table, beside my reading chair. It cast a warm, steady light across the room. No flicker, no hum, just presence. Later that night, while going through another box from my old storage unit, I found a card from Maddie. A birthday card she must have made when she was 6 or 7, crayon-colored hearts, backward S's, and a drawing of us baking cookies with flour flying everywhere. She even signed it. Your best friend. I froze. Not from pain, those days were behind me, but from that ache of what could have been. I sat on the floor with the card in my lap for a long while, wondering if I should keep it out or pack it away again. That little girl had loved me. That version of her was real. But so was the version who mocked me with her mother's words. And I couldn't mourn one without opening the door to the other. I slipped the card into a drawer. Not to throw away, just to put it somewhere I wouldn't see it every day. That night, I sent Natalie a message. Let's schedule the will changes. I'm ready. She called the next morning. Do you want to talk about it first? She asked gently. No, I said. I already did for 7 years. No one listened. The thing about people like Amber is they don't stay quiet when they lose. They can't. Silence to them feels like defeat, and they will always rewrite the story if it means keeping an audience. It didn't take long. She turned the motel eviction into a storyline, a TikTok miniseries titled When Family Betrays You. She filmed their cramped motel room like she was documenting the aftermath of a natural disaster, whispered her lines in that same fake, soft voice, zoomed in on Harper playing quietly in the corner, kept Kevin in the background, looking dazed. Maddie barely glanced up from her phone. The internet did what it always does, turned her misery into a meme and her captions into ammunition. Someone posted the clips on Reddit, and it exploded. The thread title? Mother-in-law evicts freeloading family in legal power move. Thousands of comments. Most of them praising the anonymous woman behind the scenes. They pieced it together using clues from Amber's social media, local real estate sites, screenshots of Sandra's paperwork. Suddenly, Amber wasn't a wronged daughter-in-law anymore. She was the woman who let her husband's mother pay the mortgage while mocking her on camera. Kevin's employer found out by the end of the week. His LinkedIn was still public, and someone forwarded the Reddit thread to HR. He wasn't fired, but he was placed on mandatory leave to address personal matters. Amber posted about that too, called it corporate bullying by association, and tagged random lifestyle influencers as if someone might sponsor her recovery. Then came the flood of vague quotes about betrayal and toxic elders on her stories. Camille texted me screenshots. Do you want to respond? She asked. I didn't even hesitate. No, I wasn't interested in defending myself. That's the thing about being done. You stop auditioning for understanding. So I stayed quiet. Folded laundry. Watered May. Listened to a podcast about rebuilding identity after emotional erasure. Took notes, even though I didn't need to. Then the DMs started coming. Not to me, but to Camille. Strangers, riled up by Amber's curated victimhood, found Camille's profile through a tagged post and decided she was the villain's friend. You're toxic. Wrote in hell. Jealous hag. One even accused her of elder gaslighting, a term so absurd we had to Google it. Camille, patient as always, responded to one message with a single question. You defend someone who tried to steal a house from a widow. She attached the trust deed as a PDF. They stopped messaging after that. And I didn't feel triumphant. I felt removed. Like I was standing on the other side of a glass wall, watching a life I used to live play out in reruns, only now I had the remote and I could choose not to press play. Amber kept going. Of course, trauma sells. She started a podcast called Family Fallout. The cover art was a black and white photo of her and Harper looking pensive, with a broken heart emoji between them. Kevin's name wasn't even in the description. I didn't listen to a single episode. I didn't need to. I already knew the plot, and I'd stopped caring about the characters. I've learned that people only care about your silence when it makes them look bad. For 7 years, my silence was convenient. It meant I wouldn't object, wouldn't correct, wouldn't embarrass anyone at brunch. I played the part of the smiling doormat. I brought desserts. I took photos. I hosted holidays where I wasn't allowed to pick the music, and they called me Babs, like I was some sitcom punchline with a casserole dish and no opinions. But the moment my silence became inconvenient, when I used it to disappear, to draw a line, they called it cruelty. Amber cried on her podcast. She said I ghosted my grandchildren, that I had abandoned the people who needed me most. She didn't mention the years she refused to let them visit unless I asked in advance. Didn't mention the time she told Maddie not to hug me too long because I smelled like lavender and arthritis cream. Didn't mention the cookouts where she sat in my chair and called my house a waiting room with furniture. The internet didn't care. Some did, of course, but most didn't ask for context. They just picked a side. Camille and I watched it unfold from my couch, sipping chamomile tea like we were watching a rerun of a bad show we had once been part of. People only hear what they're ready to believe, Camille said. I nodded, and Amber's always been good at telling people what they want to hear. It was a Sunday when I finally opened the last box from the garage. I'd left it sealed longer than the others, not because I was avoiding it, but because I wanted to be ready, emotionally, quiet. Inside were scrapbooks. Not the fancy kind, with glitter and captions, just binders of clippings and photos and recipes, pages of Kevin's kindergarten drawings, letters from his first sleepaway camp, handprints, pressed in paint like tiny fossils. I ran my fingers over one that said, I love you more than pizza. I remembered the day he made it. He'd asked if pizza was the highest level of love. I said, it depends who's cooking. I laughed then, just a small breath of memory. It didn't hurt. Not exactly. It just reminded me how deep the shift had been, how far the fall. Beneath those pages, I found a sealed envelope in my handwriting. To be opened when I forget who I am. I didn't remember writing it, but the moment I saw the ink, I knew it was mine. I opened it. Inside was a list. No introduction, no flourish, just a list of things I loved. Teaching 3rd grade. Tomato soup and grilled cheese on rainy days. The way Tom's laugh sounded in the garage. May mornings with the window open. Kevin's hand in mine, before he got too old to hold it. The sound of the swing in the yard. The first bite of a lemon bar. Saying no without explaining myself. I sat with that paper for a long time. It wasn't profound. It wasn't poetry, but it was a map back to myself, written before I lost so much of her to the performance of motherhood, of accommodation, of being the good one. I folded it back up, placed it in a fresh envelope, and wrote, keep this safe. Then I tucked it into the memory box beside the flash drive and the will. That week, Natalie and I met with Dean to sign the final notarizations. Dean asked if I wanted to record a video message for the kids, a legal statement they could watch one day. My own words, on camera, explaining my decisions. No, I said. They already got their message. He nodded. I appreciated that he didn't try to change my mind. Back home, I lit a candle and sat by the window with May. She was thriving, spilling over her little clay pot. I'd need to replant her soon. I stared at the flicker of the flame and wondered if Kevin would ever tell the truth to his children. If he'd ever say, we lost her because we laughed when she needed us to listen. Or if he'd just say I left. If Amber would spin a tale about dementia or delusion or vindictiveness. If Maddie would ever reread that email she sent and understand why I never replied. And then, I realized something. It didn't matter. Their version of the story didn't have to match mine. They didn't get to control the ending. Because I was no longer a footnote in their narrative. I was the author of my own. And I'd already written the final chapter. It was a Thursday afternoon when I heard it. A knock, 3 times spaced exactly like last time. Sharp, intentionally calm, like someone rehearsed it in the hallway. I was folding laundry on the couch. A fresh lemon tart from Camille rested on the counter, untouched. I didn't move at first. Didn't flinch. I just let the sound settle in the room, like a song I no longer liked. I knew it was her. Amber. Because Kevin never knocked like that. His was softer, hesitant, but hers was like punctuation, always trying to write the narrative herself. I walked to the peephole and looked. There she stood again, this time alone. No Harper on her hip, no sunglasses, just a manila envelope in one hand and her jaw set the way it always was when she thought she was in control. I opened the door 1 inch. Barbara, she said, like we were acquaintances at a wedding reception. I just want to talk. No, I replied. I'm not here to fight, she said quickly. I think we got off track. Her voice had that tilt to it again, that polished softness meant to sound wounded, but still in charge. The voice she used when she wanted something without asking for it. I didn't open the door any wider. "I'm not interested," I said. She frowned. "Don't you want to know how the kids are doing?" That one almost landed. Almost. But I knew her patterns too well. Emotional manipulation, dressed as concern. "They're fine," I said flatly. "You've told the whole internet." She blinked hard at that. "Look," she said, holding up the envelope. "Kevin wrote you a letter. He's not good with—" I cut her off. Kevin had 7 years to write something that mattered. I don't need it now. She stood there, stunned, like no one had ever denied her delivery before. "This is for closure," she tried again. I stared at her, really looked at her. The flawless hairline she clung to with weekly salon visits, the perfect nails that hadn't seen a dish in years, the tailored coat that hung too heavy on her frame like it was trying to compensate for something she lost. "You don't want closure," I said calmly. "You want access." And that was the truth of it. Amber didn't care about mending wounds. She cared about restoring optics, about having the power to say, "We made peace," so she could move on with a clean story and never have to own the part she played. "I hope one day," she said, with a tiny shake of her head, "you'll realize what you've thrown away." "I already did," I said. "It wasn't mine anymore." And I started to close the door. She stepped forward suddenly. "Wait." I paused, not because I was moved, but because I needed to be sure I wasn't reacting out of instinct. The old instinct to manage other people's discomfort. "I really am sorry," she said. I raised my eyebrows. "For what?" She hesitated. "For how things turned out." "That's not an apology. That's regret that the plan failed." I nodded once. "Goodbye, Amber." Then I shut the door. This time, I locked it slowly. Not out of fear, out of finality. Inside, I returned to my folded laundry, placed each towel gently in its drawer. No shaking, no heart racing, no lingering grief. When I sat down again, I saw her through the window standing in the hallway, holding that envelope like it was a sacred offering. Then, after a long moment, she turned and left. She didn't knock again. An hour later, I checked the door. No envelope. No note slipped underneath. Good. That meant she understood. That meant the lock meant something, this time. I made tea, lit a candle, and opened a new book. I read for an hour straight, didn't even glance at my phone. And when I finally did, there were 2 missed calls from Kevin. No voicemails, just his number, familiar and irrelevant. I blocked it. Then I deleted the thread again. I could live like this forever. Not bitter. Not sad. Just quiet. Just free. Later that evening, Camille came over with a new rosemary pot for May, now overgrown and leaning. We transplanted her together on the balcony, scooping soil with our hands, working in silence that felt earned. "I saw her," Camille said eventually. I didn't look up. "Yeah?" She parked around the corner, waited about 10 minutes, drove off fast. I nodded. "She won't come back," Camille added. "You know that, right?" "I hope she doesn't," I said, and I meant it. Because peace is not something you declare. It's something you defend. There's something strangely empowering about being unreachable. When I was younger, I believed that keeping the peace meant staying available, answering every call, smiling through every insult, showing up even when I wasn't wanted, just so no one could say I didn't try. But availability is a gift, and mine is no longer free. The day after Amber came to the door, I visited the post office. It was drizzling, the kind of gentle rain that doesn't demand an umbrella but makes everything smell like asphalt and eucalyptus. I wore my thick beige cardigan, the one with the patched elbow I refused to replace. "I'd like to set up a P.O. box," I told the woman at the counter. She asked for my ID and handed me a form. I filled it out in block letters. When it asked for a forwarding address from my previous residence, I wrote, "None. Not out of spite. Out of fact. That house is no longer mine, neither is that life. The version of me that waited by the door with lemon bars and passive hope is gone, packed, sealed, and buried beneath the roots of a tree that doesn't belong to me anymore." After I locked the new mailbox, I walked home through the drizzle. My cardigan soaked through by the time I got back, but I didn't mind. I peeled it off, brewed tea, and sat by the window with May, who was adjusting well to her new pot. "New space, same soil," I whispered to her. And maybe to myself, too. I spent that afternoon cleaning. Not because the place was messy, but because the rhythm of it soothed me. I wiped down baseboards, polished the windows, scrubbed the stovetop with lemon and vinegar. When I finished, I stood in the center of the living room and listened to the silence. No voices from the hallway. No footsteps above. No dishes clinking in the sink. I didn't dirty. Just stillness and breath. Later, I walked to the thrift store again. I've developed a habit of bringing something each week to donate. Small things I no longer want to carry. A vase from the old guest room, a cardigan Amber once complimented, a decorative sign that says family is everything. That one, I left at the very bottom of the box. When I returned home, a neighbor I'd seen a few times, a woman named Ellen, I think, was walking her dog near the front steps. She waved. "Beautiful Rosemary," she said, nodding toward May. "Thank you," I replied. "She's been through a lot. Looks like she's thriving now." "She is." I meant it. That evening, as I folded the last of my laundry and poured myself a glass of red wine, I noticed something new. My shoulders didn't ache. Not from stress, not from anticipation. I wasn't waiting for anything. Not a call, not a knock, not an apology. I hadn't heard from Kevin since the missed calls. I knew he was capable of silence. He'd used it before, to avoid conflict, to avoid accountability, but this one felt different. This one was the silence of someone who knew they'd run out of excuses. I hoped in a quiet way that he was doing something good with it, reflecting, repairing, but I didn't count on it. Because part of healing is accepting that some people never change, and choosing peace anyway. I lit a candle that night and flipped through an old recipe book. It had tomato sauce stains on page 47 and a bent corner where Tom had once dog-eared my favorite chili recipe. I traced the outline of his handwriting and the margins. "Add extra garlic. Barbara likes it that way." I smiled. Sometimes I wonder what he'd think of all this. If he'd have tried to stop me. If he would have stood beside me as I shut the door on the family we built. But then I remember, Tom loved clarity. He hated false peace and polite pain. He would have helped me carry the boxes. I slept well that night. In the morning, I made a new list, not a to-do list, but a to-enjoy list. Fresh bread from the corner bakery. Repotting May again next month. Starting a new ceramic piece and pottery class. Rewatching my favorite mystery series, mailing Natalie a thank you basket. Living isn't just surviving. It's choosing what to do with your freedom once it finally arrives. And I choose small joys, clean air, quiet mornings, honest connections. I don't need a parade. I don't need understanding. I don't even need to be remembered. But I won't be rewritten. Not by Amber. Not by Kevin. Not by any of them. The version of me that existed only in their shadow is gone. And she left no forwarding address. The day I stopped looking back wasn't a thunderclap. It didn't announce itself with an emotional crescendo or some grand epiphany. It happened on a Tuesday. I was standing in the kitchen, grating lemon zest for a tart I was baking just for myself. No holiday, no guests, no performance, just a craving. Just me, and suddenly, I realized I hadn't thought about them. Kevin, Amber, the kids, in over a week. Not in anger, not in longing, just not at all. That silence wasn't hollow. It was full of my own presence. That evening, I sat out on the balcony with May, sipping a glass of iced tea as the sun fell in pieces across the rooftops. A breeze moved through the rosemary leaves, and I could smell it, fresh, sharp, clean. I picked one and crushed it between my fingers, breathing in the scent. This was my life now. Not a second act, not a reinvention. Just the continuation of something that had always been inside me, untangled, unburdened. When Camille arrived later with a bottle of sparkling water and a basket of produce, she noticed something new in my tone. "You sound like someone who doesn't need to explain anything anymore," she said, placing tomatoes on the counter. "I don't," I replied, and we left it at that. We ate in the living room that night, sitting cross-legged on the rug like teenagers, laughing about nothing. At one point, she looked around my apartment, the tidy shelves, the soft lamplight, the warm air, and said, "This place feels like you." Not a version of me that people expected, just me. After she left, I opened the cedar chest under my bed for the first time in years. It still smelled like linen and old cedar wood, like the back of my mother's closet. Inside were pieces of a woman I hadn't seen in a long time, letters from Tom, photos from before the house, a scarf my sister gave me the year before she passed. I found a worn paperback book of Mary Oliver poems and read one out loud to no one. Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? I smiled. Exactly this. I tucked the poem inside my notebook and sat down at the small writing desk in the corner. There, I began drafting something, not a letter, not a confession, but a kind of record. A final page. If you're reading this, I lived the last years of my life exactly how I wanted. Not quietly, not bitterly, but peacefully. On my terms. I wasn't erased. I stepped away. I hope you understand that one day, not because I need you to, but because I want you to realize that silence isn't always punishment. Sometimes, it's self-respect. I made lemon bars until the very end. I repotted May 3 times. I never stopped loving, but I did stop begging to be loved properly. That made all the difference. I didn't sign it. I didn't need to. I folded it carefully and added it to the memory box, on top of the flash drive and the note that read for history, not for forgiveness. Later that night, I sat at the window with the lights off and watched the city blink alive. Tail lights crawled down the street like slow rivers, apartment windows lit up one by one, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was watching from the outside. I was simply in it, part of the world, even if quietly. No longer waiting, no longer hoping, just being. I didn't want closure. I didn't need repair. I wanted my breath, my tea, my rosemary plant, my peace. People talk about legacy like it has to be carved in stone or passed down in bank accounts. Mine lives in simpler things. In a safe, unopened envelope. In the smell of lemon bars cooling in a quiet kitchen. In the absence of a doorbell. In the sound of a woman laughing in a room she never had to decorate for anyone else again. The final thing I did before bed was light one last candle, the tall white one I'd been saving for no occasion. I didn't make a wish. I didn't say a prayer. I just stood beside it and breathed. Long, deep, present. I am here. I am not coming back. And for once, that isn't loss, it's arrival.